Hi there again, welcome to today's video. If you're new here, my name is Elenia and this is Softskill Atelier, where I teach you all the skills you need to bring your fashion ideas to life from concept to completion. On today's video, I'm gonna show you how you can create a sewing pattern from your favorite clothes of your wardrobe. So you can clone your favorite items by yourself. This is number 3 of the Basic Sewing Introduction series. If you want to learn how to sew, make sure you stick around and subscribe to my channel. Don't you know that feeling of that one perfectly fitting shirt you wish you would own in 5 more different colors? Or that one pair of pants which is slowly falling apart, but it is just a perfect fit and you wish you could repurchase again? That's why I will show you how to create a sewing pattern off of that favorite clothes of yours. So let's get started. We'll be cloning patterns from 3 different garments today: a long sleeve shirt, some pants, and the front part of a sleeveless top with a bust dart. But first I will give you an overview over all the materials and tools you need for today's session. A big surface. If you don't have a big table, it's best if you simply use the floor. Paper. We need a big paper. There are all kinds of different paper options. You can simply use packing paper or plotter paper like I use, or sketch paper on a roll is also perfectly fine. Ruler and set square. Pencil and a marker with the color of your choice. Tracing wheel. The tracing wheel is probably the most important tool for today's session. You will find a link in the description below where you can purchase the tracing wheel. Make sure you get the pointy one. There's also a more flat version, but that one is not the one we need for today's task. Eraser. Today you only need paper scissors and no fabric scissors. Measurement tape. Paper tape is less sticky than regular tape, so you can easily remove it again. Weights. I use weightlifting weights, but you can also use stones, books, and other heavy things you have laying around. Pins. Okay, so before we start, I want to give you 3 ground rules that are helpful to know if you want to trace a pattern from an existing garment. Generally, you need to know that sewing patterns always just are half of the clothing. Since most of our clothes are symmetrical, you can just mirror the other side by cutting the pattern out on a double-layered fabric. So, we only trace half of our garment because our clothes are mirrored. Putting a 3D shape onto a 2D paper. You will have some struggles with putting everything flat on the surface because clothes are 3-dimensional. So we need to do that step by step. Always making sure that the next bit we want to trace lays flat in front of you. We also need to make sure the rest of the garment won't move. That's where the weights come in handy. Tracing seams that are not on the edge. You won't be just able to copy every seam easily by tracing around the edges of your garment with a pencil. Unless you take the whole garment apart, we need to also trace lines that are in the middle of a garment, like a sleeve seam or a dart. So that pointy tracing wheel helps by puncturing the paper through the fabric while following along the seam line. The goal is that we are copying the pattern of your clothes as accurate as possible onto the paper. I chose some of my favorite pieces of my wardrobe. On this long sleeve shirt, I really like the shape of the neckline. And this pair of pants just has the perfect fit. But some seams I had to re-sew already because they are worn out and I want to make sure that I get that pattern before they completely fall apart. Additionally, I'm going to show you how to trace a dart of that sleeveless golden top. Make sure you pick some of your easier clothes to start with and keep the more complex ones for a session when you are more practiced. Let's start with the shirt. We are starting by rolling out the paper far enough so that the shirt fits on it easily. As I said already before, we will only trace half of the garment if we clone a pattern. This shirt and almost every garment has a front and a back side. We want to flip the shirt inside out to see the seam line. Then we pull one sleeve into the other one, which is kind of an inward folding technique. Flatten everything and make sure the two shoulder seams, the sleeve seams and the side seams are aligned and on top of each other. So now the whole shirt should lay in 4 layers and folded in half. Make sure the fold is exactly in the middle of the shirt so that the opposite sides are laying on top of each other. Now take a ruler or a long straight piece you can use as a ruler and draw a straight line on the paper that is at least as long as the folded middle side of the t-shirt. Place the folded part of the shirt on that fold and make sure it stays there. I like to use paper tape pins or weights for this. Make sure the fold is perfectly lined up with the line you have just drawn. Now you can start tracing the neckline and the shoulder with the tracing wheel. Make sure you hit the seam inside of the seam allowance, because this is the actual size of the shirt. The seam allowance we will add afterwards when we are finished with the tracing. Place the wheel on the beginning of the seam and slowly roll all the way to the end, with a steady pressure on the wheel to make sure the wheel leaves its mark on the paper through the shirt. The sleeve seam is a bit trickier because it is attached to a different shape and makes the whole piece three-dimensional. So make sure the body part is flat even if the sleeve itself has a few folds in it. Especially the corner from the sleeve seam to the side seam is a bit trickier to get accurate. Make sure there is a corner with a 90 degrees angle or slightly less. If you have traced everything with the tracing wheel, you can now remove your shirt and redraw the little punctured lines with the pencil. The shoulder seam should always be a complete straight line. So does the center front line. The hemline, the folded center line, should always be in a 90 degrees angle. So does the side seam and the hemline. This shirt also does have a side vent that has some folded fabric to cover the edges of the opening. We add that one on the side as well. Connect that to the side seam with a diagonal line. If you want to have a nice round neckline, the corner from the neckline to the shoulder seam and the angle from the neckline to the folded center line should also be in a 90-degree angle. Give your pattern a name. I call mine Favorite Shirt and wrote down front because it is obviously the front part of the shirt. Now you can retrace the lines with a more visible marker pen. On the lower side of the shirt, the hem is folded up. So if you want to have the same kind of hem, we will add the amount that is folded up to the end of the pattern. I didn't add anything more because the shirt was a bit too long for me already. I also marked where the center front, the shoulder seam and the side seam is, just to prevent confusion. Now take your measurement tape and measure the two seams that will later be connected to the back piece. They need to have the same length than on the back part. We need to write them down so we can compare them when we're working on the back piece. As soon as you have written down the length, add a seam allowance of 1 cm all around the pattern piece with your marker. Now it's time to cut your first piece. In the end, draw your grain line. The grain line is the direction your fabric is woven and will assist you to make sure you will put your pattern on the fabric in the right direction. In a basic shirt, the grain line should be in a line parallel to your center line. If you're done with the front side, flip the shirt around and trace the back side in the same way as we did the front side. On a normal basic shirt, everything should have the same outlines, except on the sleeve seam and on the neckline. If you're done with the back part, we are going to compare the two seams that will be connected to the back part and make sure they will have the same length than the length we have written down for the front part. As soon as you have assured the lengths are the same, name the piece as well and add the seam allowance of 1 cm again and cut it out. Last but not least, we will trace the sleeves. If you don't know it, you might not see that the two sides of the sleeve seam are not mirrored. It is impossible to lay the whole sleeve flat on the table without opening the seam, so we trace the sleeve pattern in 2 steps. Again, we keep the whole shirt flipped inside out and make sure the sleeve lays flat on 2 layers so that the seam builds one side of the sleeve's outline. The other side will automatically be defined by the middle fold of the center of the sleeve. Draw another straight line on the paper that is at least as long as the whole sleeve. Place the sleeve with the middle fold on the line and secure it with some weights and paper tape. Now you can start tracing the first side of the sleeve. As soon as you are done, place the sleeve on the other side of the line with the other side facing upwards. If you look at the 2 sides, you can see that not both sides look exactly the same. You will have a flatter side and a steeper side. The flatter side will always be the back side, and the one which is more steep and more curved is the front side. Add an extra 2.5 cm on the end of the sleeves that will be folded up and creates a clean ending of the sleeve. Now retrace everything with a marker. In the end, you also add the extra 1 cm seam allowance. Mark the front with 1 line and the back with 2. Also mark the middle of the shoulder seam. Now cut out the sleeve. Before you cut out the sides on the end of the sleeve, fold the extra 2.5 cm up towards the rest of the sleeve and then cut out the 2 paper layers together so that they are properly lined up. You see, as soon as you unfold the end, that it has created a small corner in the side seam. Now we are heading to our second piece of garment. I picked these nice silver pants I really like, but some seams I had to re-sew already because they are so worn out and I want to make sure that I get the pattern before they completely fall apart. So again, roll paper out, flip the pants inside out, then put one leg into the other one so the crotch seam lays free and is easy accessible. Secure the pants with weights, tape or pins. Make sure the whole piece lays flat on the table. When I started securing everything, I realized that the back part of the pants cannot lay flat on the table all at once because the front part, which is smaller, is restraining the back part, so I needed to trace it in 2 steps. Just watch how I've done it. The front part is going to be easier, I promise. After finishing tracing the back part, go straight to do the same thing in the front part. Make sure the side seam and the inseam is on both pieces identical in length, so when you sew them together they will line up just fine. Then start retracing the pattern with a marker and add some extra length on your hemline so you can fold it up. And finally you add your 1 cm seam allowance all the way around. Now you can cut out your back pattern. Before you do the same on the front part, we need to add an extra piece for the zip fly in front, which is an extra bit we can sew on our hidden zipper. It is usually about 2 cm longer than the zipper you're going to use and about 2 to 3 cm wide. This extra bit for the zipper will eventually only be on one side of your pants, but to make sure you will have it cut out on the right side, I usually cut it out identical on both sides. On my pattern you can see both versions with a seam allowance on the pattern. Now you can also cut out the front part. The last thing I'm going to show you today is how to take a pattern from a piece of clothing with a dart. I take this sleeveless top with a bust dart. Again, flip the shirt around and fold it in half. On the slippery fabric, I secure the fold with a few pins so that it doesn't move. Lay the top flat on the paper and put some weights on it. Start with tracing the outlines that are above the dart. As soon as you arrive at the dart, trace the two dart lines, the dart seam line and the folded line. To make it straight, use a ruler. Take the top away, and now we have a bit of a tricky thing to do. We need to fold the paper on that folded dart line. For that, I'm gonna cut away the excess paper around my sketch. If you manage to fold the paper, you see immediately that the paper won't lay 100% flat anymore because it becomes three-dimensional through that fold. That's exactly what we want because that's what darts are here for. Make sure the fold looks in the same direction than on the dart of your top. Secure the fold with a bit of paper tape. Now place your top back on the sketch and make sure the top lines up exactly with the lines you have traced already. Now, continue tracing around the rest of the top. Make sure you trace one more time over the side seam where now the dart is folded in to make sure the folded layers are properly traced as well. For the center front line, I always use a ruler to make sure the fold line that is going to be your center front will be a straight line. If you're done with that, remove the top and remove the tape of the dart fold and open the fold. Now start drawing the punctured lines with a pencil. You will see now that the dotted lines on the side seam next to the dart will now show this big corner, and additional to the two lines you have traced, there is a third one that appeared through the folding. Redraw them all with a pencil. Double check if the corner between the hemline and the middle fold is in a 90 degrees angle. I readjusted mine so that the top is a bit rounded on the hemline. If you have redrawn everything, add your seam allowance and finally enforce the lines with your marker. Now, cut it out with your paper scissors and you're done. You can apply this technique to trace dots on all kinds of different clothes. The trick is simply folding the paper of the dot away before you can draw the rest of the pattern. In the next video, I am going to show you how to sew a long sleeve top based on the pattern I have made today. I'm going to show you how to make some first basic pattern alternations, 2 different ways of attaching a sleeve onto a body part, and we're going to explore the options of how to sew a stretchy fabric with a household sewing machine. Don't miss out on that one. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you could learn something from it and you managed to clone your piece. Make sure you keep your pattern safe so you can use it for future projects. I will also refer to these patterns in upcoming videos where I show you how to sew and alter and manipulate a pattern. If you like this video, please let me know with a comment or a thumbs up, and make sure you don't miss any of the upcoming videos by subscribing to Softskill Atelier channel. I see you next time. Bye!